Right, now we're going to have a look at other building materials like wood, metal and glass. And if you have a look here, for instance, at this photograph, here we've got an old doorway with flaking paint and wooden lintels that have seen better days, and the bottom of the door panels has rotted. Real character in the picture there. And here you can see, although this isn't strictly a landscape, this in itself would make almost an abstract painting, but a very, very beautiful painting for which acrylic painting is absolutely ideal. Right, we're going to start painting these doors. You can see on this panel that I've already pre-painted a rough, and it is a very rough outline of some stonework. Here I've painted the base colour for the wooden door lintels surrounding the doorway itself. So I'm going to do these doors in a pale blue, and we're going to give the impression of cracked and peeling paint. Right, now you can see that I've mixed a grey blue with ultramarine blue, a little touch of raw umber, some white and a little retarder gel. And we're going to, for convenience sake, I'm just going to paint in each of these door panels. You can see I'm using the flat brush like that. We'll divide them up more accurately later on. Okay, well, we very quickly blocked in these doorways now, and the paint, as you can see, is already starting to dry, which is actually an advantage when you're coming to do these old doors and flaking paint, because it almost creates that sort of dry brush hit and miss effect that you're going to want to do anyway. Now, while that's drying off, what I'm going to do is put a dark colour in here to represent the interior of this building, and a little bit of the lighter ground colour here. Okay, you can see I've still got hold of the 1/2 inch flat brush here. What I'm doing now, as you can see, is I'm just putting a semblance of that dark interior, but I've painted here a slightly lighter browny grey to represent the ground. Right, now I'm adding rather more white to the paintbrush, and then we'll take most of that paint off, because what I want to create now is that sort of dry brushed effect. Now the next thing I want to do is bring in a small number 1 brush, and to start giving a little impression of perhaps paint that's been underneath and has flaked away over the years and has been replaced and painted over and so on. So we'll put on here, for example, we'll just put at this stage a couple of little marks. And then, having done that, we'll now just get some white paint, or not quite white paint, it's sort of slightly off-white paint, and then that just starts to highlight this darker area. You can also drag down a few bits and pieces. Look, there's some dark paint come out on that. That's fine. You can see that all of this, it's almost impossible to do this wrong, because all of this is actually going to give you some lovely character. Now I'm using a much thinner paint because I'm going back into a very dark blue and brown. It's almost a black. And I'm imagining the sun is coming from the left hand side. So what we'll do is we'll just create a little bit of shadow for some of that flaking paint there. And then if we go the other way and get some light paint, okay, now I'm using a 1/2 inch brush. You could use a 1 inch brush or any flat brush, or you could use a rigger if you want to. This is really just to create a reasonably straight panel, but remember that you've got a lot of character in these doors, so even the door panels can tend to be a little bit skew with at times. Okay, now you can see that I've put in some dark lines to represent the gaps between the planks and the doorway. So now what I'm doing, bearing in mind that the light is coming from left to right, I'm just going to catch the right hand side of those lines, if you can see that, as if the light is catching the front edge of those planks and a little bit more of the doorway, like that. And I think I'm just going to give a bit more highlight to that inner panel on the door frame. In fact, what we'll do is, while I've got that in mind, we'll just do some more dragging like that. Now, just to finish off this section, I'm just going to just distress and deteriorate some of these planks at the bottom, like that. Just by, you can see I'm just painting a round dark line, really, as if they're really falling apart like that. And there's a little bit more shadow underneath where the inside can be seen beneath these rotting planks. Right, now I've painted in some pale blue, very similar to the pale blue I used for the light areas of the doors here. And you can see I've just painted that in there in vertical stripes with the brush to give that sort of nice angular effect. While that's still drying, I'm just going in with some slightly darker blue, and particularly under what would be the shadow area of that window frame. Again, with the light coming from left to right, I'm going to perhaps do that. Now, I'm putting in, again, still using the flat brush, I'm just using the flat brush to give us an effect underneath the window frame, and slightly, not too much on this window frame here because it's partially hidden. Right, now I think what we'll do is emphasize the recess in the window opening itself, if you like, the brickwork where it's set back. It's catching the light. The light is coming here, so you can see this window frame here, for example, this side is wider than this side because this side is partially hidden by the protruding brickwork. And if you wanted to, you could leave the window and the window frame exactly as is, or if you wanted to, you can put a reflection in it. And let's say we've got some trees on the opposite side of the street, and maybe the corner of the roof of a house opposite, and there's a chimney. Okay, we've let this dry. We're just highlighting some of the window frame again and just tidying things up. But what I'm going to do now, you can see I've just done a very dull outline of an imaginary, there's the angle of the roof line, and you can just about see a window, an upstairs window opposite, a little bit of a tree, and of course you've got the chimney and the chimney pot. It's no more detail than that, because unless you're doing this as a portrait almost, then you don't want too much detail in it. But what you can do is to just, as you would do with water, just a few little streaks of highlight. Okay, let's move on to some old wood that's been unpainted, but it's deeply fissured and cracked and split. Right, now you can see what I've done here already. I've painted one plank or one log, whatever it might be. And all I've done is I've put some yellow ochre, a little bit of cadmium red in this case, and some raw umber on the brush. And I've brought it down like that. I've really no idea how it's going to turn out until I drag it down. But what it does, you can see, is I turn it backwards and forwards and let the paint mix in its own way. And almost by itself, rather than anything particularly clever that I've done, you can create this lovely impression of wood. Now we'll wait for that to dry and start creating some really deep fissures, and we'll put a little bit of an old metal bar on it and show you how that works with a little bit of rust to finish off. Okay, now you can see I'm using the rigger and some very dark brown, almost black paint, and I've just drawn a little sort of rough circle and a couple of little bits around it to represent a knot in the wood. We'll just develop that in a second. Now to give that real impression of the knot bulging up above the level of the wood itself, you can see how easy that is just by putting in a few little flicks of paint, and already that looks like it's gnarled and bent, but the light coming from the left hand side and the darks that we've already got give us that impression that there's all sorts of three-dimensional effects there, isn't it? What I'm going to do, I'm just going to finish this section off. I'm just going to put a piece of rusty metal across there and see what sort of effect that will create on the wood. Yeah. Okay, now you can see what I've used here is pretty well neat raw umber. I've not worried about getting an absolutely flat even colour. In fact, I don't want it. In fact, if you like, I'll just use my finger to get some all sorts of splodgy effects on it. And what we'll do is we'll just put a little hint of light, as if the light is catching the front edge and the top edge of the metal, like that. And then we'll just drag that in slightly. In fact, I think what we'll do is we'll use this scrappy brush, and I'll put a little bit of cadmium red into this to start bringing out some of the red rust in it. And we'll put a little bit of neat ultramarine blue, because believe it or not, that will actually enhance the effect. It'll give you this sort of lights and shades, not too much. I'll take most of that red rust paint off, but what I'm going to do now is to just drag that down as a dry brush effect. Now let's just create ourselves a little bolt. Maybe there's a little bolt head that's holding it onto the door, like that. So if we paint that round like that, and then paint the dark shadow side like that. Okay, just finish off with a little bit of highlight, just reinvent that highlight again, just on the front edge of the piece of metal, and that little bit of bolt that we've created there. You see how it's a shadow that side and light that side, that gives that sort of round effect. And you could go on forever more, as I say, just giving that sort of textured effect. But I hope you can see that as I just put in a few more darks here, just to re-emphasize these dark fissures, that it's not at all difficult, and indeed it's a great deal of fun, and you get an awful lot of enjoyment painting with acrylics when you get into this sort of detail, whether it's for the wood here and the rusty metal, whether it's the glass or the flaking paint on doorways. It doesn't really matter. Go ahead, have a practice and enjoy the process.